Hey everyone, this is Ben with the Leyline Network. I'm bringing you a Pauper deck tech today. The deck is called Land Stompy. It's a fun and aggressive take on your typical Stompy deck. Alright, let's jump right in. The mana base is pretty easy. It's just 17 forests. As far as creatures, we have 23 1-drops and 4 2-drops. The rest of the spells in the deck are used to keep the pressure up and to protect your creatures. Alright, the first few creatures I'm going to cover here are what gave me the namesake of the deck. First one being Scythe Tiger. It's 1 green for a 3/2 with Shroud. When it enters the battlefield, sacrifice it unless you sacrifice a land. And Rogue Elephant, 1 green for a 3/3 with when it enters the battlefield, sacrifice it unless you sacrifice a forest. These creatures are huge for their converted mana cost, and it's very tempting to cast them out on turn 1, but trust me, it's worth it to have the extra mana for turns 2 and 3. The goal for these creatures is normally to cast them on turns 2 or 3 so that you can have as many creatures available to swing out and keep the pressure high. The curve of this deck is so low that sacrificing a land is rarely a problem. However, these two creatures do come with some risk. First one I'd like to address here is with Scythe Tiger. If it's the only creature that you end up having in play, then all of your pump spells end up being dead. And so that's why I decided to go down to 3 of them instead of a full play set. The next risk I'd like to address is if the game is going long and you end up drawing multiple of these guys, you might not be able to cast them without sacrificing the last of your lands. But that's where our next creature comes in. Harvest Wurm is a 3/2 for 1 and a green. When it enters the battlefield, sacrifice it unless you return a land card from your graveyard to your hand. Harvest Wurm allows you to continue sacrificing your lands while still keeping it in the game. The next couple creatures here are Jungle Lion and Nettle Sentinel. These are the ideal creatures you want to have in your opening hand. The 2 power they have is a great way to apply early pressure. Jungle Lion is 1 green for a 2/1 that cannot block. Now, not being able to block is not much of a drawback for this deck because we're going to be wanting to turn our creatures sideways every turn. Besides, in the event that you do need to block, there are plenty of other creatures in the deck that can cover your bases there. Nettle Sentinel is 1 green for a 2/2 that does not untap on your upkeep, but you may untap him anytime you cast a green spell. Is there some risk to this? Yes, but it's very low, because the grand majority of the time you're going to be able to untap him and swing in every single turn, whether you're playing another creature or a pump spell. Yeah, there will be some games where you won't be able to untap him for a turn or 2, but trust me, it is worth it. Next creature we have here is Skarrgan Pit-Skulk. It is 1 green for a 1/1 with Bloodthirst 1, and creatures with power less than him can't block it. Bloodthirst reads, if an opponent was dealt damage this turn, this creature comes into play with a +1/+1 counter on it. That built-in evasion is amazing for both early and late game. It can allow you to apply a lot of early game pressure that can't be blocked, as well as pumping them up to get in the final hit and win the game. Next we have Young Wolf, 1 green for a 1/1 with Undying. Undying reads, when this creature dies, if it had no +1/+1 counters, return it to the battlefield under your control with a +1/+1 counter on it. Young Wolf is an amazing card against Mono Black Devotion with their effects that make you sacrifice your creatures. The biggest drawback to Young Wolf is the fact that he is only a 1/1, and your opponent knows how valuable it is for you to have the 2 power creatures. They're going to avoid blocking him, they're going to avoid using their removal on him. The rest of the deck is a bunch of pump spells. Rancor is an enchantment that costs 1 green and gives enchanted creature +2/+0 and trample. It also comes back to your hand if it's put into the graveyard from the battlefield. This card is an all-star in the deck. The fact that it gives not only 2 extra power, but also gives trample and comes back to your hand after it goes to the yard, this is some hardcore value. It does everything we want in this deck. It allows you to apply a lot of pressure early. If your creature it's enchanted to is removed, it allows you to just play it right back out. This card is a must for the deck. Hunger of the Howlpack is an instant for 1 green that puts a +1/+1 on target creature, and it has Morbid, which means that if a creature died this turn, you put 3 +1/+1 counters on the creature instead. A useful synergy I would like to point out for this card is that if you have one of your land creatures in hand, you can just cast them and sacrifice them to their own ability to enable Morbid. Now, I do try to avoid using this because you are going to be 2 for 1-ing yourself, but there are definitely situations where it is more beneficial to get that extra boost and push through that extra damage. These next 2 cards are great because they work double duty in our deck. Early game, they work as protection from removal, and late game, they are great for pushing through the last bit of damage needed to win. Mutagenic Growth is an instant you can cast by paying 1 green or 2 life, and it reads, target creature gets +2/+2 until the end of the turn. I decided to go with this card over Groundswell or Bone Splitter because, if needed, it can be cast without paying any mana. Vines of the Vastwood is 1 green with a kicker of 1 green. Target creature can't be the target of spells or abilities your opponent control this turn. If Vines of the Vastwood was kicked, that creature gets +4/+4 until the end of the turn. Like I said before, this is one of the best cards to avoid removal, and it has the added bonus of being a pump spell when you need it. Alright, let's cover the sideboard now. The first 2 slots I use for Prey Upon, but Epic Confrontation is also a good option for these slots. Prey Upon is a sorcery for 1 green. Target creature you control fights target creature you don't control. Epic Confrontation, on the other hand, is a little bit more expensive. It's a sorcery for 1 and a green. Target creature you control gets +1/+2 and fights target creature you don't control. I prefer Prey Upon because of its converted mana cost, but there will be times where you will be thankful for the extra power and toughness that Epic Confrontation gives if you choose to go with it. The next card in the sideboard is a full playset of Feed the Clan. This is an instant for 1 and a green to gain 5 life. It also has Ferocious, which allows you to gain 10 life instead if you have a creature with 4 or greater power. Now, this is primarily for burn decks. If they get a good opening hand, it's very rare that we'll be able to outrace them. It is ideal to cast this with Ferocious, but be careful because those decks can do a lot of damage very quickly. To deal with Kuldotha Jeskai, Affinity, and Bogles, I have 2 Natural State and 2 Gleeful Sabotage. Natural State is an instant for 1 green that reads, destroy target artifact or enchantment with converted mana cost 3 or less. Gleeful Sabotage is a sorcery for 1 and a green that reads, destroy target artifact or enchantment. It also has Conspire, which allows you to tap 2 green creatures as you cast the spell to copy it, and you may choose new targets for the copy. I have 2 Gutshot on the sideboard for my matchup with Elves. It is an instant that costs 1 red or 2 life to cast. Now, of course, there's no red mana in the deck, so we're always going to be paying 2 life. The main creatures that I'll use this against for Elves is if they have their Well-Wisher or Priest of Titania, because Well-Wisher gaining them that much life is very hard for us to overcome. And Priest of Titania is so fast at ramping out their entire hand that it can just be devastating and, once again, hard for us to come back from. As an honorable mention for this spot is Sandstorm. Sandstorm is an instant that costs 1 green, and it deals 1 damage to each attacking creature. Now, this card can cause some huge blowouts for the Elf deck, but unfortunately it doesn't do quite what we want. Because, like I said before, Priest of Titania and Well-Wisher tend to be some of our biggest threats. And normally they hold those creatures back. They're not swinging in with them. So even though we can take out a large part of their board, we aren't normally going to be able to hit the creatures we want to be hitting with this. The last 3 spots in the sideboard go to Thermokarst. It is a sorcery for 1 and 2 green to destroy target land, and if it's a snow land, gain 1 life. The second part about the snow land usually doesn't come into play. This is a very important card against Tron. Sure, in some games we can outrace them and take them out before they can do much. However, if they have a good hand and get Tron on turn 3 or 4, there's not much we can do in some of those games. So just being able to hold them off of Tron for 1 or 2 turns can easily be the difference between winning and losing the game. That's all I have for today, and if you want to see the deck list, it is in the description. If there's anything you guys would do differently for this list, please leave a comment below. And if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. And if you want to see more content like this, definitely subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching the Leyline Network. This is Ben signing off.